So tonight, the last broadcast on how to taste, and we'll be concluding with the step number 4. We'll do a refresh. We covered 3 steps prior to. The first step was dealing with looking at the wine, and simply put our surmise looking at the wine, checking its clarity, checking its color, checking to make sure that the wine is a pretty good looking wine when you want to drink. Make sure there's no particles or floaties. If there's bubbles when there shouldn't be a bubble, so we take a look at the wine. Of course, you can look back at the notes and get some of the detail on what you're doing when you're looking at the wine. Then from there, we went into and we talked about the smell of the wine, where we talked about the swirl. If you're a good swirler, hold it by the base and swirl. If not, put it on your hand or on the base of the table, hold it by the stem, and swirl clockwise or counterclockwise. And that swirling, agitates, aerates the wine to release the beautiful esters of the bouquet and the aromas in the wine. Sticking the nose in and having a quick smell at first in order to give that, boom, that burst. The wine is saying, hello, I am here. And you're saying, welcome, welcome, welcome to my party. And then on that second smell is just taking a nice long inhale. We're talking for about 10, 12 seconds, up to you, just to give, that the wine's aroma chance to, and this bouquet a chance to just roll through your nostrils and to absorb or engulf all of the wonderful flavors that are aromas that may be present in that wine. And then we covered taste, the moment of truth, where you begin to taste the wine, and what you smell should be what you'll taste in the wine plus more. Okay, and that was a 2-step process we did. 1 sip, nice little rinse on the palate, about 10, 15 seconds, and then your second sip is when you begin to taste the wine. And now we are at the moment. Okay, so you think about tasting wine, and it seemed as though, although we broke every step down, it seems as though there's a lot that goes into tasting wine. But once it becomes a habit for you, you'll find that you'll just go through these processes, these steps, unknowingly. Oftentimes that I have a glass of wine, I'm always swirling, always aerating the wine, checking the temperature of my glass, if it's white wine or red wine. These things just come natural after a while. In fact, so natural that you'll find yourself swirling a glass of milk or a glass of orange juice or maybe even a glass of water. That's how natural it becomes and habitual it becomes after a while. And so you don't have to worry about, just constantly thinking about the process. It just happens all on its own. Excuse me 1 minute, I need to get my glasses. All right, I'm back. It just happens all on its own. All right, so we go through and we're doing these natural steps, natural processes, and we're tasting the wine. But with that smell phase, we're smelling, we're writing down what we smell. Boom, 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 boom. You're taking notes, meticulous notes. First thing that comes to mind, you're writing it down. Boom, 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 boom. And now we go through and we smell and we taste. We taste the wine, the same thing, we're writing down. This is what I taste. I taste this. Oh, I feel this, have this sensation. I talk about the components. Remember the components in the wine. We have the alcohol, you have the tannins, you have the sugar. We want to make sure that those components are in balance, with themselves. One is not higher than the other. Writing that down, our impression about that. Is this wine balanced? Taking the meticulous notes. And now we're taking, and constantly we're tasting, constantly we're smelling, smelling and double checking, going back over our notes, taking information, more information in, taking in the aromas of the bouquet of wine deeper and deeper, equating or relating it to different smells that we've come across over our time. And we have that database. Remember, we build that database of different scents in our mind. And as we taste the wine over and over again, we're tasting and we're spitting, because you constantly tasting, if you're tasting a series of wines, you don't want your palate to become numb or deadened to the different flavors of each wine. So you're tasting, swishing, spitting, and you're writing down even more notes. Okay, and now you've gathered all this information, you have all this data, and you come to the finish. What is the wine's lasting impression? It's one of the questions you ask yourself would be, its finish, its length, length meaning how long are you tasting, are you able to taste that wine on your palate? So you take a sip, and I do like, seconds, less than 30 seconds or more than 2 minutes. It's somewhere between and be a medium, like medium to long or short to medium, So let's get a sip here on this particular wine here. I'm drinking a white wine. So I inhale through the nostrils with the mouth closed, and so I can taste the wine. So I'm tasting wine. I'm already beyond 30 seconds on this wine. I'm at 45 seconds on this wine already, and just tasting, and it begins to start off really strong because you just took the wine in. Now you're measuring the length of time that you can continually taste this particular wine. And that's how you determine the length of finish. It's impression. Let's say it's flavor. Okay. So I'm going to give this wine I'm going to give this a long finish. Okay. This is definitely more than a minute, creeping up on 2 minutes. So this is going to have a long finish of this wine for me. So this is one of the questions you ask yourself, how long can I taste this wine? Another question you'll ask yourself will be, is it true to varietal character? Meaning, is it true to grape or is it true to fruit? I mean, if it's an apple wine and you're tasting it, it shouldn't taste like cherry, right? If it's a grape wine, of course, we're talking about character, varietal character. We know that some grapes, they will have the characteristics of some of your other fruits. Because of the process, the yeast, the fermentation, because of the process of making a wine, it takes on many different characteristics, of other fruits and vegetables. So we want to take a particular, remember I uploaded a sheet that went through various grapes, including Wisconsin grapes, and it gave you different characteristics of a grape. So we're tasting the wine and we're saying, is it true to varietal character? This particular wine here has a blend of 3 grapes. We have Traminette, which is a Gewürztraminer hybrid. We have Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc. Okay, those are my 3 grapes here. So it may be difficult when you're trying to discern this information if you're tasting a blend. That comes with time when you begin to taste more individual grapes and become more and more familiar with the profile, the flavor profile of those particular grapes. You'll be able to now, when you're tasting a grape where more grapes or multiple grapes are used in a blend, you can pick those grapes out. And that's what we mean by, is it true to varietal character? So I'm going to taste this wine again. Now, I know that for Gewürztraminer, and again, the Traminette, we're talking about, honey. We're talking about tropical, pineapple fruits, talking about a little spice. I get that. Sauvignon Blanc, very citrusy, more grapefruit, grassy. I get that. Chardonnay, not so much. Chardonnay is one of those grapes that on its own, it makes a wonderful grape. But when it's blended with 2 grapes that possess power in its aromatics, a power in its flavor profile, it's kind of going to downplay it. So in this case, the Chardonnay could be, contributing more fruity character to the wine, more grape fruity character, not grapefruit, but more grape fruity character to this particular wine. So Chardonnay, not so much. The Traminette and the Sauvignon Blanc, yes. So for the most part, pretty true. Even though Traminette would be the first grape, Sauvignon Blanc is the second. So pretty much, it's true to varietal character. You also want to ask yourself, is it a young wine or is it an old wine? A young wine, whether it be red or white, will be vibrant. Again, the acidity would be lively. The wine would just be like very exuberant on the palate, like, woof, wow, that wine is great. It has a fresh taste to it. It has a fresh smell to it. You know, so this would be a fairly young wine. When I say young wine, we're talking about less than 3 years, 3 years or less. You know, within release. So it's pretty fair to say it's a pretty young wine. You make it even go 5 years depending on the wine or the grapes used. Does it have aging potential? You know, so these are all the things that you're like finalizing your overall analysis. You know, so these are some questions that you begin to ask yourself. Does it have aging potential? Well, you know, that all depends on a particular wine. You know, they say most wines are made to be drank within 5 years. You know, but if it has certain components that exist, certain pieces that exist, it may have the potential to age. You know, again, we're talking about intensity of fruit, intensity of flavor. That's a good point. How long can that intensity last? Okay, it's very intense now. It's very youthful. Can it go 5 years? Can it go 6 years? Can it go 10 years? You know, you're determining that. And so what happens, again, with that aging on the fruit, it's going to change. Certain things are going to become softer. Some things are going to become more intense. Different flavors are going to come out. You know, so I'm tasting for that. When I taste one, oh, my God, I think I'm going to sit this down and see what happens. You know, acidity. Okay? Acidity acts as a natural preservative as well in wine. Does it have enough acidity in it? Acidity in this particular wine is moderate. It's not intense. It's not crazy, but it's there. Will it last? I mean, it's kind of like light to medium bodied. Will it last? Time will tell. I mean, the flavor, the acidity is there. My mouth is watering. The flavor or the aroma, aromatics are just like boom right there. The taste is fresh. I think it will, but it's all a guess. It's all a guess. I mean, that's wine. It's all a guess. I would lay it down and see what happens. You know, so you should give it a try with some of your wines. You know, lay it down or find a wine, you know, that you're familiar with and find an older vintage and give it a taste. All right. So that'd be one question to ask yourself. Is it balanced? You know, and probably, again, one of the most important, you know, aspects, you know, when you're evaluating this wine, you know, when you're drinking the wine, do I taste all alcohol? If it's a sweet wine, do I taste all sweetness? You know, less in the case it's a dessert wine, but even a dessert style wine needs to have some balance. It can't be like a sugar syrup, even though you may find some wines out there like that. But I like to have my dessert wines have a little more balance to them. You know, if it's a red wine or even some whites, you know, is it overly tannic? You know, I mean, how intense are the tannins in the wine? You know, I mean, these are the questions you're asking yourself. You know, I mean, is it in balance? You know, what does that feel across my palate when I drink the wine? And I'm going to evaluate this one right now. Okay. Now, a complete palate rinse, letting it just slowly just glide over my palate, hit all parts of my mouth, all parts of my tongue, and I'm determining, does one thing stick out over the other? Does acid stick out more? Does acid overshadow the fruit qualities? Do the fruit qualities overshadow the tannins if they exist? Is alcohol so strong that it burns on the nose and it burns on the throat? This particular wine here, I found it for my palate. Again, here's where the individual tongue, like your own personal identification, will give a completely different opinion. On my palate, I thought the fruit flavor, the fruitiness that's there, gave me that hint of sweetness, very hint. And it's a dry wine. The acidity, you know, I thought it spread very nice across my palate, made my mouth come alive. Tannins were just like very subtle, very subtle. Alcohol, low alcohol wine, you know, not too intense. We're talking maybe 13% on this one here, not too intense on the alcohol, you know. And I thought overall for myself it was just pretty much very well balanced. I got, because of the particular grape, again, we're talking about a Sauvignon Blanc, I got a little bit of bitterness on the back of my palate. You get that feeling here, but it wasn't intense. I thought it was very well blended in this particular wine. So again, overall, my impression of this wine, for my palate, would say I thought it was very well balanced. I'll reveal what this wine is as we get to the end. All right, so pretty well balanced for me. Is it aged in oak? This wine wasn't aged in oak, but the next question would be, if it were aged in oak, is it over oaked? Meaning, do you feel like you're chewing on a toothpick, when you're drinking this wine or when you're tasting this wine? Do you get that feeling, or do you get that kind of that tactile astringent feeling, when you have a wet toothpick in your mouth? You get that toothpick juice, I like to call it. If it was a oaked wine, because this wine is not oaked, so it doesn't apply here. Again, we talked about the alcohol. So these, again, are just some of the few questions that you will ask yourself when giving your overall impression, a lasting impression of this wine. And most importantly, the most important question, without going through all of the processes, the most important question will always be, do I like it? Yes, I like it. I like this wine very much. Hello, I like this wine very much. So that's a very simple way. Again, as I said earlier, that process, the steps, you're going to do that naturally, automatically. You're going to, swirl the wine, smell the wine. Even in conversation, you're going to be swirling and smelling, and all of a sudden, boom, you're going to smell something that just came out of nowhere, and then you're going to taste. And you do these processes quickly, even when you're in company with others. All this is done rather quickly, and you're tasting wine, and in your mind, you're taking these notes. I don't know myself, when I'm tasting wine, and I'm not doing a formal type of wine tasting, and I'm just out and about, hanging with friends, or even alone in a restaurant or something, and I'm tasting wine, I'm taking all these mental notes. It's been said to me in the past, how can you remember all this wine? It's because I'm in tune, man. It's because I'm in tune. No, really, I am in tune. I keep track of a lot of wine. Of course, the older I get, and the older the far back the vintages are, you begin to forget the names of the wine. But I don't forget the taste. I don't forget the taste. I don't forget what I liked about a particular wine. If I hear the brand, it'll jog a memory. Oh my God, yes, I remember I had this particular wine from these particular years. This is what I thought. So if you continuously taste wine, you begin to build that mental database of all this wine, all this information. I mean, for me, it's pretty much just information. And that's what I want it to be for you, because this information helps you as you begin to taste more and more and more wine. And again, as I said, whatever method you come up with to help you decide if you like a wine, use it. I'm just giving you some fundamentals here to help you go deeper, but in the end, in the overall spectrum, again, it can be as simple as drink, simple, quick. Do I like it? Yes, no. And that's that. That's the finish. Okay? So this part isn't going to take too long. And now I want to go into wine thoughts. I mean, which is very, very interesting when it comes to wine thoughts. I mean, there are aromas and tastes in wine that we they appear to be a fault, or we may think it's a fault, or it just simply is a part of the wine. It reminds me of a story at a wine tasting I was doing, and I was pouring a wine that was from Chile. It was a Pinot Noir from Chile, and pouring the wine. A young lady was tasting wine, and she let out this ew, ew, ew. I'm like, wow, what? She said, it tastes like dirt. I said, you get it? And so she looked at me very puzzled and said, what do you mean? I said, you get it. That's the same impression I got. It tastes like earth. It was a very earthy wine. Oftentimes we forget about our childhood days when we used to eat dirt. So we kind of forgot about what dirt tastes like. Or if we're not working outside and we get the dust particles blowing on our palate or in our nostrils, we don't get a chance to remember what earth or dirt tastes like. So I told her she got it. And from there, it piqued her interest into wanting to learn more. She said, well, isn't that a bad thing that it tastes like dirt? Shouldn't it taste like fruit? I said, no. So let's help you break it down. Can you taste this? Can you taste that? This is the fruit this is the fruit that it's made from. Take away these elements. Can you taste this fruit? Yes. I said, you got it. So it's very simple. If you keep it in simple terms in your mind, it all makes sense, and it makes it a lot easier, and it makes it a lot more enjoyable. And that's what I try to do at many tastings that I've done and many classes that I've done, is to make it very, very simple. No big words, no fancy words. Just make it very, very simple. For you, the average wine drinker, to understand. So let's talk about faults. I like telling that story about the earth, because most people, again, would think that would be some sort of a fault. So when we go through faults, I'm going to cover some basic faults. And again, I uploaded the note sheet with some of these faults. So you can go over them. But these are kind of like the most noticeable ones, I would say, amongst amateur or new or even intermediate wine drinkers. Okay, you'll notice this. And what would be called TCA? And I got to look at the word here. So TCA, which stands for trichloroanisole, trichloroanisole. All right, and what that is simply is cork taint. Maybe you heard someone say this wine is corked. But what exactly does that mean when they say this wine is corked? Because there's that ritual. There's a ritual when they pull the cork out, present it to you, and you smell the cork, and you say, well, I smell a cork. And believe it or not, I do too. I smell a cork. And I smell some of the fruity elements that are there, but I, for the most part, smell a cork. But that is not what's meant by cork. So we have to differentiate between just the natural smell of a red cork, of a cork that was sitting in wine, versus the smell of a wine that is actually corked. And a wine that's corked is going to have more of a moldy or a mold smell to it. Okay, it's going to smell musty. It's going to smell moldy. Just like when you walk down in the basement that had been flooded or something, or has been damp because of over time, you get that musty mold smell. So it's more like a spore, like the same kind of spores, a bacterial spore. So in order to determine that in wine, though, you not necessarily will smell it on the cork. What do we got here? Watch myself. You won't necessarily smell it on the cork, but you will smell it in the wine itself. Reminds me of another story. I was doing a wine tasting. Actually, before I did the wine tasting, I was selecting wines, doing a tasting, and I actually got a corked wine. I'm like, oh my gosh. I said to my buyer, can I keep this wine? Because I know you have to take it back and get credit, blah, blah, blah. But can I keep this wine? Because this is going to be an excellent lesson to teach people. So it was a wine that was corked. It was funky. It was nasty. It was bad. But you didn't know it right away. You just kind of had to know from practice, right? So we opened the wine, opened the wine at a wine tasting, opened the wine for people, and I said, okay, here's the cork. It was a synthetic cork. So you're not going to smell much on a synthetic cork, on a rubber cork. You're not going to smell much, all right? So there goes the cork theory, tossed out the window. Next, I said, okay, I passed the bottle around. Smell the bottle. So they're smelling. Everyone's smelling. Well, smells like, something's off, but it kind of smells like wine, like it normally smells. Okay, so everybody got that. And then here it was. I get so excited. I get chills even now talking about it, because it was like the best lesson. I kept that wine for like six months to teach this lesson. So I now poured the wine in the glasses. Before they even put the wine to their nose, they're like, oh my God. I said, you got it. Oftentimes, you won't even know that the wine is bad unless it's just like, it's like really funky, nasty, old, ratty. Ugh. But most times, you won't even know until you pour it into the glass. Remember, the whole process of having more surface air in order to have the wine breathe, in order to incorporate more air for the aromas to come out. Well, that's what we did. We poured a little bit of wine in a glass, about this much. It wasn't much. And as soon as you had more air in contact with such a small amount of liquid, it all came out. All right. So the mustiness, the mold, the mildew, it all came out in that particular wine. So sometimes you have to pour the wine into the glass in order to discover it. Next, we're going to talk about sulfur dioxide. I mean, I remember that in the early 2000s, it was this huge thing about, sulfur gives me a headache. Why is it when I go to Europe and I drink wine, I drink more wine than water, and I come back home and I get these headaches? It's oftentimes, I don't know if it's still true now, but in Europe they use a lot less sulfur versus we did in the States at that time. But I'm sure all that information has changed now because everyone has become more aware of the effects of sulfur in wine. So, and first of all, let me say it's a natural occurrence that happens in the grape making process. The winemaker just adds more, and the purpose of that is to kill off any bad vibes in the wine, bad bacteria, bad yeast, bad vibes, get rid of it, and also they utilize it to clean out tanks, barrels, all that kind of stuff. This is clear it all out, okay? But what happens at times, some people have different sensitivities to sulfur. What happens is either it's a sensitivity to it or the winemaker use a little bit too much, okay? And it's also gets injected into the bottles at times, and to sterilize the bottles. And so the wine is there. The wine is sitting in that bottle, corked, closed, for 6 months, a year, 2 years before it's released. Then the wine is open. Now, I'm not talking about that first scent you get when the wine is open, okay? Let's give the wine its due, okay? Think about if you sat in a closet, for 6 months, with no air coming in, all of a sudden you open the closet, okay? Same thing here with wine. It's been stuck in the bottle, right? So you open that bottle, pour some wine, and get some air inside of it, give it a chance to breathe. Now what happens is this. You go to, again, here we go. You got to pour the wine in the bottle. You go to smell it. Whoa, Betty, woo! That first initial smell, is going to be just like when you first strike a match. Just that split second right after you strike the match, you get that sulfur smell. Just that quick smell. And sometimes you can get it when it blows out, but it's also now at that point it's blended in with the burned wood or the burned paper from the match. Or you get the rotten egg smell. If it's very, very potent, you get the rotten egg smell. Okay, so that's what we mean when we're talking about sulfur. All right, and that can be a fault. Although, because it's a natural occurring thing, and the traces are going to be there, sometimes it can add a little bit of more character to the wine if it's in a small dose. Okay. But again, you get to that point. Again, the sensitivities are different. If you get to that point, the little match smell, okay. I mean, you can smell it if you know what you're looking for. You can smell it. But this is like, okay, no big deal. But if it's like, whoa, baby, somebody left the eggs out, that's not good. Okay, so that's sulfur. Another would be Brett or Brettanomyces. Okay, it's a little spore. And in fact, that's like, you consider that like wild yeast. Okay, some wild yeast are good yeast. Some wild yeast are bad yeast. And those who are familiar with natural making wines or done some research about it, they make those wines with the natural yeast, that's present on the grapes. And actually what happens when they bring the grapes into the fermentation area, because they've been using the wild yeast, and you hope that your area is now populated with all good yeast. There's like a yeast battle going on here in the winery, you know, and you want your good yeast to win if you're fermenting with natural yeast. But every now and then, whether you're using the natural yeast or using your own yeast strain, and you sterilized everything, at least you thought you sterilized everything really well. All of a sudden, you're going through the process. You know, it can take place in the tank, it can happen in the barrel, it can happen in the bottle. That one went from 1 to 1,000 yeast. They got their army together and said, we're gonna battle it out, and it found its way into your wine. Now here's what we're talking about, okay, on that particular wine. You know, we talked about, you hear this thing about wines, you know, and it can be good and bad, okay? Again, it's just like anything else. Anything in excess is a bad thing. You know, there's natural occurring things that are going to happen. I mean, some things add character, but if it takes over, it's bad. So here's what happens. You're smelling a wine. Oh, it's kind of earthy. Kind of get that barnyard smell, okay? I mean, sure you heard people speak about that barnyard compost smell. You know, those all can be good things. But if it becomes overly intensified, when we start talking, I don't know if you ever worked on a farm and you had to clean up the cows or clean up the horse barn or even clean out the goat barn. I had to clean out a goat barn, you know, and so it's like when I smell goat in my wine, brat, you know, I mean, that's a funk you don't want. You know, again, once it starts transitioning over into bad vibes, bad aromas, that's when you know it's done, okay? Next is oxidation. Oxidation is simple. An apple, slice the apple, sit it on the counter, you see what happens to it. I mean, in fact, slice the apple, set one on the counter, take the other, take a bite out of it, okay? 30 minutes later, take a bite of the one you laid rest on the counter. Taste the difference. Oxidation. All right, so you have that brownish color, it begins to turn. Same thing happens in wine. And of course, in wine, in this case, it's going to happen very, 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 very slowly, okay, because all the processes went through. It's going to happen very, very slowly, whereas the apple itself, it's in the raw state. You can actually taste it in grapes, too. If you happen to crush some grapes, accidentally just slightly crush, not completely, slightly crush them, have them on the counter, you'll experience this oxidation, you experience these transformations that take place. Same thing happens with wine, okay? A wine that is left, again, there's a point where air is good, there's a point where air is bad. During the early stages of the winemaking process and crushing and getting in the tanks, air is not good. When it's inside the bottle, air is not good. When it leaves the bottle, air is good to a point, okay? If I were to leave this wine out, in fact, the fact that this wine is already in the air, it's slowly becoming oxidized, but not to a point that it sacrifices integrity of the wine, okay? It's not that bad. But if this was left out in the glass for about 2 days, yeah, it's going to be completely different. So it becomes oxidized. You won't get that much of a drastic color change, but you're going to definitely get it on the taste. So in most cases, you won't see it in the color, especially if it's a deep red wine. You won't see it in the color as much, but you'll definitely get it on the taste. And that taste is going to be like something stale, something old, something flat. I mean, think about having a soda that you left out, and you went from like, woo, that soda is very bright, very tasty, you know, to an hour later, you taste it, and it's like flat. No carbon dioxide, just flat soda, okay? So you think of wine the same way. It begins to break down. It is a living thing, so it begins to break down. Next, we're going to talk about acetic acid, all right? Simply put, vinegar. These are all simple transformations that take place. It can happen in a bottle. Again, oxygen in this case got inside the bottle, and with that air, And because it's a living thing, there may be small traces of yeast still in there. You're just barely there, and they need air, they need sugar, and it's just a little bit of sugar there, even if it's a dry wine, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm growing, I'm multiplying, we're having a party now, we're doing it, and it begins to go beyond the point of winemaking. It was already into wine, but it goes beyond the point of just making the wine better. It goes to the point of making the wine bad. Okay, in this case, we're talking about a wine that we may have spent anywhere from $10 to $1,000 on a bottle of wine, and it has become oxidized, and we didn't know it because it was just laying in our basement or in our cooler or in our wine room. And when we finally opened it, the cork looked fine, but again, as soon as we poured it in a glass, we smelled it, it's like, that smells funny. And you're thinking to yourself, well, it's just been sitting in the bottle for a while. Again, there it is. But that smells kind of funny. And if you want to understand that smell, just open a bottle of vinegar. Red wine vinegar, white wine vinegar, balsamic vinegar. Open up a bottle of vinegar and smell, and get that feeling, that sensation, what happens in your nostrils when you smell vinegar. You'll get that, and that will always stick with you when you're drinking wine. If the wine has went to the point of turning into vinegar, of course, the taste is going to be a true tale. Taste is going to taste like vinegar. It's going to have that burning, unbearable, palatable sensation. Vinegar. Have you ever just taken a small taste of vinegar? That's pretty much you can get in the wine. Now, it can be very subtle, right? This is where you begin to train your palate to pick up the subtleties, because if it's there in a small amount, that means it's going to grow. That means this wine is on its way. If you leave it under the right conditions, it's on its way to making vinegar. But all that's not lost. If your wine already tastes like vinegar, one that you've had, for a year or two, then let it be vinegar. It's an easy process, it's a natural process. Let it be vinegar and use it in your salad dressings, okay? So there's a use for it. Waste not, want not. But if it's a wine, as with all of the wine, I'm talking about one more before I give this closing. Acetone. Now, what do you mean acetone? Fingernail polish. You ever smelled and or tasted a wine? In fact, I rarely even taste the wine if I smell acetone. Sometimes I taste it to see, okay, maybe it's another process, oxidation, vinegar, bacteria, that even went much further. It's volatile acidity. The acidity is just out of control. We don't know what's going on here, what we're doing, but we're trying to get out. All right? And your wine ended up tasting like fingernail polish. I mean, sometimes we have homemade wine and we taste wine like, wow, that's not the same one I made, because at some point it went far beyond what you originally did with the wine. So again, fingernail polish remover, dead on. You smell that? Myself, there's nothing pleasant about it. It takes away from the wine itself, just the smell. I mean, again, as I said, your nose is probably your first line, of whether or not you're going to enjoy this wine. And oftentimes the wine doesn't get past my nose because I'm a wine drinker. I'll taste the wine after that. After I smell it, because oftentimes it just like I smelled some wines, white wines that smelled like pepper jack cheese, and tasted the wine. The wine was okay, but I couldn't get past the pepper jack cheese. I'm not really a fan of pepper jack cheese, so that wine was gone. Again, with the acetone, the aroma can be potent, but then it may be subtle to almost non-existent, which kind of means the same thing on the palate. So give it a taste. But by all means, if you don't like it, don't drink it. So now, what do you do if you have a wine that's bad? In any of these symptoms, okay? Let's say you went to the store, you bought a bottle of wine, whether it be the market, the liquor store, or your neighborhood wine shop, and you purchase a bottle of wine, and you open it up, you pour into your glass, and you pick up one of these, say acetone. You're like, oh my gosh, is that right? I don't know if that's right. I mean, you're not an experienced winemaker, but the fact that you had doubt, it's steering you in the right direction. So what did I say? The nose is your first line of defense. It doesn't smell good to you. Any store monger or wine shop seller worth their weight in gold, you bring that wine back, let them know what you discovered. They're either gonna smell it themselves and still exchange it, or give you another bottle, or give you credit, or they're just gonna exchange it and or give you credit without even dealing with it. Okay? No one wants to have a bad wine experience, and no wine merchant wants to have their customer have a bad wine experience. So you take it back. But what if I'm sitting in a restaurant and they brought my glass of wine out to me? Well, here's something that I do. I do one of two things. If I'm interested in a wine, I ask for a taste. Okay? Here's why I ask for a taste. One, to determine if this is the wine I want to invest in a glass or a bottle in. Two, to determine if that wine is oxidized. Because in some of your restaurants, some of your bars, that wine may have been a wine that was open once, only one person ordered it, and it just sits there. Okay? It just sits there. And it's probably just, slowly getting oxidized. Maybe somebody forgot to pump it. And so its air is just trapped in there, and it's just doing this thing, and it's a party going on in the wine. Here we go. And so they bring the wine to you, taste it, and it's flat. And I sometimes ask, when was this wine opened? And if they tell me, I just opened it. Well, I don't want that wine. That's it. If it doesn't taste good to you, don't drink it. All right, don't accept it. We're in the business and we're consumers and we're spending our money and we want to have a good time. And the restaurateurs and or the merchants, they understand that. So there's no reason why you need to have bad wine. And also, as the saying goes, life is too short. Hear me now. Life is too short to have bad wine. So do not waste your time with bad wine. With that said, I hope that you enjoyed this series. Instead of going to 5 parts, I combined the last 2 into 1, so it's 4 parts. As we're on to the new year, and I'm ready to get on to the next thing I'm going to be introducing to you guys and ladies. So I hope that you enjoyed this 4-part series on how to taste wine. I enjoy presenting it to you.